Hey there! So in this tutorial collection I want to talk about some of the animation tools, compositing tools, a couple of ways to combine stuff. There was a question on how to work with animated selection mask if you have a mask, and so this is going to be roughly it to give you an idea. In fact, before we do that, let me just show one thing we'll also do, and that's to talk a little bit about the right-click option on the timeline here with some of the editing tools, including extrapolate the frame. You could call it intrapolate. It's basically finding an image that doesn't exist. It's broken. You want to base it on two neighboring pictures, right? You have a frame and maybe it's bad, but this one's good, this one's good. In fact, I have one in here. You can see it sometimes when you play it. You might notice something a little glitchy. Oh, there it is. Play it again. Boom, right there, near the end. So I'm going to go close to the end to find it. There it is. Right, there's a frame that's missing or didn't render, or maybe I accidentally undo something, or you can go look for it. There it is. All right, so there is this bad frame. And one thing we can do is we could certainly take this one and just replicate it, or we can take this one and replicate it, or we can say let's do both. Let's get a interpolated here we call it extrapolate this frame. So this frame is going to be a blend between the first one before it and the one right after that. So extrapolate this frame, there it is. So now, of course, if we stop on it, we can see there's a bit of rotation, there's a little bit of change here. So there's a ghosting, a half and half of both. But when it goes really fast, you just barely can tell. Right, so it's going to go at 25 frames per second, and it's really difficult to notice that one glitch now. All right, but that's the final, that's sort of the post-editing, if you have any sort of things that didn't work perfectly, or if you damaged something, right? The sky, this is how that started. And we have a sky that I created with the sky render, and the idea was to create maybe a background that's looping. An animation that you cannot really tell that it's repeating. Now here you can, because it's short enough and there's only about 20 frames in which you see it fade out before the next one comes in. We'll talk about that. We'll make something a little bit longer. This is just a little test. The other thing we'll do is we'll work with a video. I had taken some capture. We'll work on how to crop it, how to maybe adjust contrast, do a couple of things. And you notice I stabilized it too, so there's a little bit of edge conditions that we won't care about, because it's dark enough for the object we do care about and bright enough for the background, whether it's over here or on the left edge. We should be able to eliminate that in the filters, such as the threshold filter, right, where we can see this, and if you adjust it, you'll eventually get to just seeing only your drone. We're going to do that across the animation. Before or after that, we'll also need to, work with the extracted outlines, and that's going to be crucial because we can use that as a mask, right? That's a selection mask. We don't need to necessarily do blue screen anymore if we have that mask already, and that's the reason I'm doing this here, is to show, well, if you don't have the mask to begin with, you have to create it somehow. Sometimes it's tedious, sometimes you can just find a perfect blue sky. If you shoot something like this against a uniform color that doesn't exist on the object itself, you can easily separate them with green screen, blue screen, any color actually. And so we have some tools in the filter here to composite with swap against a color key of your choosing, or a green screen or whatnot. But before we can do that, it has to be in the swap. And so what you do is you take that selection mask that this animation of the selection mask, and you designate it as an animated selection. So now as you are scrubbing through it, you see the marching ants. If you load something else in it, and that is correlated, you'll see that selection mask perfectly matching there. And that's all we need to then turn it into an animated brush, which we have here. And with that animated brush, we can paint against something else, or we can go back to this guy. In fact, before I do this, let me go uncheck this selection mask, clear the selection mask, load the sky, And then of course we can take this brush, which is an animator brush. We have the whole animation that we had loaded from these two parts, the current animation of the drone in color, RGB, plus the selection mask in the swap. We had those two together captured into this the animator brush. You can see the film strip here. It is a brush with more than one image. It's the whole animation of the drone right in here. And the mask that we have here was used to load it into alpha. The brushes are RGB alpha. They have RGB and an alpha channel, so we can actually have an animation there. And with that, you can now go and paint with that, right? So if we minimize this and select the paint tool, show the current brush preview, there it is. As you're painting, you can see the rotators are blending. The blades are rotating rather, and then you can do a couple of other things. You can change the size. You can change the size over time. In fact, there's also a couple of post-processing options that you might use if you want to take the brush stroke and sort of change the size over time. So you do a brush stroke like this, and then it rescales it. Right? But of course, ideally, we're applying that against the animation, so each frame across the animation is going to be a little bit different. And that's really what we'll do in the timeline, the brush keyframer. Right? So when we have this animation here and we have this in the brush, then we can do the following. We can go here to the where is it? The brush keyframer, and it takes that current image that you have, the whole animation actually, and lets you scrub through it. It shows the brush. Now this is actually the finished animation, or it's rather actually replaying it, because the keyframes are remembered from last time I used it. So it's doing the exact same thing. You can see the path is still there. The dotted line, that's the path I had keyframed. And so we'll talk about how to do that, and then that way you'll be able to do all sorts of funky stuff. I've done this before. I can in fact reload this right here where it's already loaded, where it's already showing it, but I can do now maybe a second drone, right? So I'm going to go clear the existing drone animation, clear all keyframes, and then just go, you see there's one in the background animation, and now I'm just rendering another one. Maybe it's not even going to be inside initially. I'm going to keyframe that, and then by about here maybe we have this guy come over a little bit more intense, a little bit bigger. You could also flip it horizontally, vertically. You can rotate it. You can do a bunch of other things. And maybe this guy likes to rotate around. Let's do this, and then come to their senses. Let's see, maybe something like this here, rotate it, or maybe rotate it a few times, and there you go. And so there you go. So just to give you some ideas, there's some crazy stuff you can do here, and that's what will be the focus of this particular tutorial. Hope you can join.